So, but here come the men of the hour. I see them arriving. I get, this is Ian. And this is So, just a few words. I wanted to congratulate this fellow with a capital F, because he is a new fellow of the Royal Society of Literature. I really enjoy writing to you now, and I say, fellow, hey fellow. Anyway, as you know, Ian has been publishing books since the 1980s, and I'm happy to say that he has been visiting us since the 1990s, in any case.
You're a very young folk out there somewhere.
You are. This evening's host is Mark Pryor, who's wonderful, so I'm just going to scoot my chair out of the way here and let them know. Actually, I had a microphone.
I do. I got one right there.
Just working.
Okay.
So first of all, I want to apologise for my voice. I'm not trying to compete with the sexy Scotsman. I'm well aware that the English voice is second rate to the This reminds me of the time I was on a panel with Peter May and sat down. I didn't realise who he was, and I thought, as usual, I had the nicest accent. And then he started talking, and I was like, damn it. And the next year it was John Conway, so Irish. So when I do these, I typically love to involve. Now you can actually hear me. No, you want me to repeat that. Anyway, what I usually like to do is I love to involve the audience. So if we're talking about something, if somebody has a question, because I know you guys have come a long way and it's an evening out for you, and for me it's usually best if Ian tells you something you want to know rather than something I think that you want to know. What I want to do, we'll talk about a little about the book, but let's talk about some extraneous stuff because it's something of an anniversary for the series. So why don't you talk a little bit about what's on tap for that?
Yeah, thanks very much.
You're right. I know this one works.
Yeah, it's just need to switch it on.
Yeah, just push it on. This one.
That's on that. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah, yeah. I used to be in a band, you know, when I was 18. I'm back in a band actually. My wife will now have her head in her hands, but there's a bunch of 50-year-old men who all go and practice on a Monday night. We've got 3 songs. Not quite ready.
Can we have one of them tonight?
No. But the guys keep saying, they said, lyrics are very dark. Yeah. That's why you hired me. So I was in a band when I was 18, 19, but now I'm celebrating 30 years of Rebus. 30 years, not in the US. The US will be next year. Will be the 30th anniversary of the first book, Knots and Crosses, being published. But it was published in the UK in March 1987. And it was published to universal acclaim, except nobody realised it. I think it got about 3 reviews and wasn't shortlisted for any prizes or anything. It just kind of disappeared without trace. And I thought that was that. You know, I tried to write a crime novel and it hadn't worked. So I went and did a spy novel, thinking I was going to be the next John le Carré. That was called Watchmen. And that sank without trace. So I was looking around going, what's selling? What's selling? Oh, techno thrillers. So I wrote a book called West Wind, which you will never find in any store. I won't allow it to be reprinted because it was so bad. And that was my attempt at a techno thriller. It involved space, satellites and shuttles and this, that and the other. I didn't know what I was doing. I went to the library in London where we were living at the time to get some books out about satellites and space shuttles. And the books they got me were just like basically geometry, page after page of geometry. I thought this is useless. And eventually went to the kids section and got me my big book of satellites, which was a wonderful big format book of lots of illustrations and arrows pointing to it and descriptions of what satellites do. Great. And so I wrote the book, and when it was published, one of the reviews it got said, technically exacting look at, you can fool some of the people some of the time, you know. So that didn't work either. And by then my editor said, hey, whatever happened to that guy Rebus, we should bring him back. And that was all it took, really, was my editor to say, I like that guy, maybe there's more you can do with him.
I liked it better than the other stuff anyway.
Well, he certainly, yeah, I mean, really, I mean, honestly, you know, I think he was the same as me, who scratched his head going, what's this guy up to? We don't know what kind of writer he's going. I didn't know what kind of writer I wanted to be. That was part of the problem. I was kind of scratching around. I mean, the first book I tried, well, no, when I was starting to think about writing, I was going to write horror. I was a big fan of British horror writing at that time in comic books.
Well, you talked about Jekyll and Hyde in the way that you see crime fiction being kind of Jekyll and Hyde in many cases.
Yeah, I suppose Jekyll and Hyde counts as a horror novel, doesn't it? As well as being almost like a crime novel. I mean, a novel of murder and mystery. Yeah, I mean, I was at Edinburgh University, and I was just, you know, I wanted to be a writer. All I knew was I wanted to be a writer, and I tried being a lyricist for non-existent bands, and I tried being a poet, and that really hadn't worked out. And short stories, but you can't make a living as a short story writer. In fact, my wife will tell you, I even had an idea for writing a Mills and Boon love story, a kind of, you know, a romantic novel to sell to the ladies. Yeah,
It's not too late. You know.
it was going to be about a woman who's got a terrible disease, and she's not much longer for this world, so she decides to go on a world cruise. And she falls in love with this guy on the cruise, doesn't tell him, of course, that she's terribly ill and hasn't got much longer for this world. Then she keels over, and it turns out he's a surgeon. And he's the one person in the world who can save her. Huh? Anyway, my heart wasn't in it, so I don't know.
You have an audience somewhere right here.
Yeah, no, I'm giving that out there. I hope somebody will write it one of these days. I think I actually got the style sheet from Mills and Boon as to how to write a romantic novel.
They have one of those?
I think that you used to have a style sheet you could get. You know, it said no sex, you have to, you know, 1 foot on the floor at all times. You know, there's probably got to be a reversal, so they've got to fall out or they start off hating each other and the romance only comes slowly. There was all these tricks. There was a guy actually, when I started off in this business, there was a Scottish crime writer with the wonderful name of Hugh Ray. Just say it, Hugh Ray! Hugh C. Ray, no longer with us, God bless him. He was a gorgeous individual. But he wrote these quite tough Glasgow-based crime novels. But under the pseudonym Jessica Sterling, he wrote a sequence of best-selling romantic novels about a woman who drove ambulances in World War II.
God, I never realized there was a guy that...
You know, it's like in the present day when people turn up to see the author of Mama Remote's Way, not expecting a middle-aged Edinburgh gentleman to suddenly be, you know. I think people were kind of surprised when they first saw Sandy McCall Smith. Thought, how are you managing to write about a woman in Botswana? Any questions? No.
Moving back from romance, now you were going to tell us some of the stuff you got on tap with the anniversaries.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not writing a book this year because we're too busy celebrating 30 years of Rebus. I'm running around the world doing tours pretty much all year and festivals. And in June, last day of June, first day of July, we're going to have a Rebus Fest in Edinburgh. So we're hoping for some decent weather. Yeah, we're hoping that will be the summer.
One day.
Yeah.
Summer
Yeah.
week.
So first,
Do you have global warming there too?
we don't get as much rain as we used to, I don't think, and the winters aren't as cold as they used to be. So we've got global change, climate change, definitely. But you know, I came to the States, and the tour started in New York, then moved on to Boston, where we got 14 inches of snow. And I thought, well, that's okay. But you know, half the audience didn't make it to the Harvard Bookstore because it was 14 inches of snow. But I made it. I went in the underground. That was sort of fun. Trudged through 14 inches of snow to go to a bookstore. Why the hell not? What we're talking about? Oh yeah, Rebus Fest. So what we're going to have? I don't know what we're going to have. We're going to have lots of stuff, but it's all under wraps at the moment, or we've not quite got it finalised. It will be announced on my website in March. There's going to be a couple of bands playing music that I like and that Rebus would like. There's going to be maybe a film show of one of the films written from one of my stories, but not a Rebus one necessarily. I've done a couple of other things that have only been shown once or twice. Doors Open was made into a film, and one of my short stories was turned into a film called Rankin Falls, and you've hardly ever seen. So we might show one of those. Rebus walking tour, pub quiz. There's a ton of stuff. There's a friend of mine who's a graphic artist who does comic books, and I've given him my 10 iconic moments from the series, like my 10 favourite moments, and he's actually doing them as posters and postcards that we can give away. And there's going to be, for one lucky winner, there's going to be a tour of Leith Police Station with me. We thought, well, how many people can you take into a police station? Not that many, really. And the thing is, I mean, it's a pretty iconic place for me because that was where I went when I was writing the first Rebus novel to ask the questions, you know, how do you guys work? What happens in a police inquiry?
Can you do like Rebus now? Just walk past the front desk and just stroll on in.
No, I can't do that. I can't. No, and who can? I mean, you know, he's going to find that progressively harder to do. We were talking about this a little bit last night in Austin, Texas, where you know the last couple of books. I think the book before this and this one are really about Rebus. The March of Time, you know, mortality, tapping Rebus on the shoulder and tapping Cafferty on the shoulder. And these two guys looking at each other and looking at the world around them, not quite sure how they fit in. Do they fit in? Have they got any role to play? And part of that is Rebus is now retired and he doesn't have a badge anymore. And at the moment, I can just about realistically get him into a police station.
Well, he's turned from a cop to a PI now, right? Essentially.
He's not a paid PI. He's not a person that people come to with problems and they pay him and he fixes it for them.
Nosy PI.
But he's a yeah. What is he? He's a nosy Parker. He's a guy who lives to be a detective, you know. And being a detective has meant the whole world to him. And he's now got in his spare bedroom at home. He's got boxes and boxes of case files of cases he worked on down the years that were never satisfactorily resolved. And so you can dip into those from time to time as occasion demands, and you can maybe work on one and see if there's any progress to be made. And the fun then for me is trying to see if I can connect that to present crime, which means that I can introduce the real cops as well. So it's not just Rebus as a retired cop going around. But yeah, at the moment he can go into a police station, you know, one he's worked in, and he knows the people behind the desk. I'm just going to go up and visit Siobhan, or I'm just going to go and visit Malcolm. Yeah, on you go, and he can do that. But you know, in a year or two from now, those cops will have moved on. Younger cops will have arrived. They don't know who the hell this guy is. He's just an old guy walking to the police station. So again, that gives me a challenge, and I mean that challenge is terrific because you know people often ask me when you've got a long-running series, and this has been a long-running series. This is book number 21. They say, how do you keep it fresh? And for me, it's like each book is a standalone. It's a things have moved on. These people's lives have changed since we last saw them. And the world around them has changed as well. And so Rebus can't use his physical heft in a way that he could have done 5 or 10 books ago. So he's got to use his wits and his wiles. And at the same time, when he goes out looking for the old bars where his snitches used to hang out, they've all been turned into Starbucks. You know, and the snitches are all dead. So, you know, so he's thinking, well, okay, how do I approach this investigation when the way I used to do it doesn't work anymore? So that keeps me on my toes.
So, I mean, I know people are going to be wondering, as you sit here today, amongst your fans and your readers, and I know you're not writing a book this year, but do you know where you're going? What's going to happen? How and if it ends?
No, I don't know how and if it ends. It probably ends with me in a box. But no, I don't. I don't think. I mean, from one book to the next, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. You know, I sit down 6 months shy of deadline. The adrenaline gets in, the panic starts, and I look in my big book of ideas.
Is that a literal book?
It's a folder. It's a kind of file, and it's full of bits of paper. Things written, I half-baked ideas, character names, jokes, puns, ideas people tell me in the pub, people write to me at the Oxford Bar and give me ideas. I go to a lot of police retirement parties and the cops will give me ideas, they'll tell me stories of things that have happened to them. Most of them so unbelievable that you couldn't use them in a book, but some of them, because you know, fiction has to be realistic, the real world does not, and we're living through these times right now.
We're not going to go there tonight.
Both sides of the Atlantic. Both sides of the Atlantic. We're living through strange times in some ways. I feel sorry for fiction writers right now. I'm kind of happy I'm not writing a book. Let's wait and see what happens before we write the books. Yeah, and I don't know. When I start a book, I get the folder out and I go this clipping from a newspaper. I mean, with this new one, I want to do a cold case, and the cold case is very vaguely based on a true story that happened in the 60s. A sort of well-heeled woman who went missing and her body never turned up, and her husband was suspected, but there was never any evidence. There was the cold case, but also there'd been a financial impropriety. There'd been a story of financial impropriety that had been in a magazine, current affairs magazine called Private Eye that you'll know, and also been covered on the television. A documentary had been done about it. It was something that had happened specifically in Scotland that could only happen because of the way Scottish limited companies, corporations are structured. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting, I could do something with that. And I just, started bouncing it around. All the time with the deadline looming, and the panic sets in, the adrenaline gets going, and you start writing. And what I do is I've got a house, we live in the north of Scotland, in Cromarty, as some of you will know. and no, it's got no cell phone signal, we've got no TV up there. I've taken my aged laptop computer with me. I mean, it's so old it's actually coal-fired. Alright, you have to put a shovel full of coal in it at the start of each day, get it booted up. And I just, it's Windows 95. It has no internet access. And I take that with me and I just get up there, plug it in, and I start writing, and I write all day. Go to the pub at night, a meal, a couple of pints, and this new book, the first 100 pages were done in 10 days up there. Now that's first draft. That's first draft. But when you're 100 pages into a story, you think, okay, yeah, this is going to work. I don't know until I'm that far in if I've got enough. This is going to work? And by then I'm starting to see connections between characters and how one plot might connect to another plot. But I was 2/3 of the way through before I realised that a minor character was actually the major character. I wasn't, I write the books to find out what's going to happen.
So you're not big into plotting or devising the crime and then working backwards?
I'm not. Are you?
I always start, I know who dies, I know why they die, and I know who did it. And then the mystery for me is, how do we get there?
Yeah. You see, I mean, I know who died usually at the beginning, but I don't know who did it or why. And so I know. No, I mean, I think this is great for me. It's the way I work. It doesn't necessarily work for anybody else. Everybody's different. But I'll know as little as a detective when I start the book. Now, because I'm writing about police detectives, we usually start with the crime scene, because that's when your detectives come on board. So the kind of gruesome stuff's already happened off camera, and we're not usually seeing it through the killer's eyes. So we first arrive on the scene with the cops. And the cops go, who is this? What's happened to them? Where do they live? Who are their relatives? Where do they work? Who do they work beside? Have we got any CCTV? Let's get the forensics done. Let's get the autopsy done. And by that stage, I'm 40, 50 pages in, and I've built up a network of characters and interconnections between them, and strands tangents I can go off on. Interesting strands, hopefully. This person might be connected to that person, this person might be involved in some nefarious thing,
So you can be 50 pages in and not know who the killer is?
Oh, 150 pages in.
That's incredibly brave. That's nuts. Very brave. Very brave.
Well, I know a lot of writers who work like that.
Really?
I know a lot of mystery writers, a lot of crime writers who actually work like that. We make up as we go along, and the story tells us where it wants to go. And it's always somewhere more interesting than we thought it wanted to go, or where we wanted it to go. I mean, when I wrote The Hanging Garden, which is a long time ago now, I mean, the first draft was over and done, and I still had no idea who the killer was. I went back, it was just big gaps, so I thought, we'll fill this in later. And I went back and read through the first draft, and I went, oh, okay, hang on a minute, you were there, and you did that, and so, it was you. But it was like second draft before I worked out what was going on.
Wow, that's remarkable. I don't think I'm brave enough to do that.
Well, it's brave or stupid, but it works.
Well, yeah, I mean, look around, clearly it works.
I've always trusted to the views, and the thing is, by the time I do the second, third draft, it looks like it was always meant to happen that way. So the third draft will go up and I'll say, oh, hang on a minute, make sure he's the guy in the hotel that night, or make sure this is the person who's got the key, or make sure that person did that. And I can tidy all that up second, third draft. But the first draft is really loose and baggy and ragged.
So I want to go back to something you were talking about, Rebus getting older, and I just was wondering whether you have a fascination with not just the cops and the crimes, but the bad guys, because Cavity's getting older too, right? I mean, is he like Rebus in that he's kind of hanging on to his lifestyle too? And do you have that fascination that I know I have, and a lot of crime writers have, with what makes the mind of a bad guy tick and continue to tick?
Yeah, I mean, often the bad guys, the evil characters, the monsters are the interesting ones, aren't they? I mean, Hannibal Lecter is a much more interesting character than Clarice Starling, and of course, often the devil is all the best tunes. We're interested in devilry and why people do terrible things to each other specifically. Cafferty was a minor character in book 3. And he needed to be there. I wanted to get Rebus to Glasgow for some reason so he could get a clue. And I thought, why is he going to Glasgow? Oh, he's giving evidence in a court case. Who's he giving evidence against? Now, at that time, this would have been the late 80s, Glasgow still had still had some fairly well-known gangsters. Edinburgh's never had gangsters in the way that Glasgow has. Edinburgh's half the size, half the population, hasn't had the same problem with gangs per se. But there were a lot of very noteworthy gangsters and people working in gangland in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s in Glasgow. So I thought, okay, he's a gangster. He's a Glasgow gangster. And in fact, Cafferty in the series, if you read it, has two completely different backstories. Because I forgot that I'd given him the Glasgow backstory. And then later on, it turns out he grew up in Edinburgh. So, you know, I mean, there are mistakes in all the books, but that's a howler. That's a howler.
Do you get called on it? Has anybody said anything about that?
I think one person maybe once called me up on it. I noticed it because I had to, a few years ago, my UK publisher asked me to write new introductions to the books, so I had to actually go and read my own books, which I would never do otherwise. And so I read the whole lot of them, and you know, I'd forgotten a lot. I mean, A, I'd forgotten a lot of the stories. B, I wasn't sure what was going on in some of them. You know, I mean, I remember liking Dead Souls, and I read it and thought, this is terrible. This book is so convoluted. I've got no idea what's going on here. Who are these people and why are they doing these things? You know? And that was a really fat book. That was probably my biggest, you know, longest book. And my books are starting to get shorter. Again, I'm starting to think, you know, you don't need that. There's a lot of keep trim until the story gets to a manageable length. And also, I'm probably afraid I'm going to die before I finish writing them these days. You know, I'm going to get to that stage in my life now. I want to get the book finished before I die, or at least in a state where someone else can finish it for me. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this thing about Rebus aging and Cafferty aging, I think, you know, I think it's me. That's me kind of wondering, you know, I ache in the places where I used to play. You know, the knees ache, the hearing's going, the eyesight's going, the teeth are going. I'm going, Jesus, what's happening? You're falling apart. So I give that to Rebus to deal with. That's a way of, I mean, that is cathartic, it's therapeutic, it's a way of being able.
Well, let's be honest about this book and about the underlying reason for his illness.
Well, yeah, I know, and you know, she here.
Credit where it's due, right?
Yeah, well, no, it's my wife's fault. It's my wife's fault. She's hiding at the back a little bit. No, it's not her fault, but she's been saying for a few books that Rebus has had a really charmed life. I mean, he's been smoking all the time we've known him, he's been drinking alcohol all the time we've known him, he stays awake late at night, he sleeps in his clothes, he doesn't exercise. She said, surely his luck's got to run out. And she's been saying it for a few books, and I thought, okay, this is the book. And she's got a friend who's a GP, a general practitioner, a doctor, and so I sat down with a friend and said, what would you expect Rebus to present if he walked into your surgery? And she just laid out in graphic detail these terrible, horrible things. And I was actually fairly, you know, I thought I went soft on him actually. He's got COPD, pulmonary disorder, which he ain't going to get better from. He ain't going to get better from it, but it isn't necessarily life-threatening. But it's an ailment, and it's made him think, ooh, mortality is tapping me on the shoulder big time. And yeah, you were talking about Cafferty. I mean, Cafferty's got the same thing. He's seen all these younger, more venal, streetwise minor characters, minor gangsters come along and start invading his territory, and he's going to step back, and he seems to have let them do it. But at the end of the previous book, Even Dogs in the Wild, he holds up a finger. He's walking away from Rebus, and he holds up a finger to say he's got one fight left in him. And this book is the story of that fight, I think, amongst other things. And it's kind of Rebus as well, thinking, do I have any, you know, the world's changing around me, and do I still matter? Do I still make a difference?
And the fight becomes much more cerebral too, doesn't it? I mean, like you say, they don't have the heft of the fighting and the running and the chasing. It's much more Sherlockian in some ways.
Yeah, except that Cafferty does become a much darker, more physical guy in this book than he has been in the previous few, because I felt people were coming up to me at signings and saying, "Oh, I like Cafferty. He's a big cuddly bear of a guy." And
it's not right.
You're not supposed to think that. You know, I've not done my job. I've not done my job, and so in this book he gets a lot darker again, and I liked him being a lot darker. He started life as a I mean, I've probably mentioned this here before, but he did start life as a homage to Lawrence Block's Mick Ballou in the Matt Scudder novels. They were some of the first American crime novels I read, and I loved them. And Rebus, I think, does owe a little bit to Matt Scudder as well. But Mick Ballou, this kind of gangland killer who wears his dad's butcher's apron whenever he's carrying out a killing. This physically and psychologically, I think in the early days there was a fair amount of Mick Ballou in Cafferty.
So one thing I think probably people may agree with me, you just have the coolest titles for your books. Where do they come from? And is that intentional? Is it a focus for you?
In the early books, I was using music quite a lot as a way of delineating character. So you know, if you were new to the series, you could tell quite a lot about this guy Rebus by the kind of music he was listening to, his age, his demographic, Is he a sociable being, or is he a loner? You can get a lot of that from the kind of music he listens to. And then as an offshoot of that, I started to name the books after songs and albums. Started off with the Rolling Stones for a couple, and then kept moving. And then I stopped doing that for a while. I didn't do it. And then when I was bringing Rebus back, consciously I called it Standing in Another Man's Grave, which is a misheard lyric from a song by a friend of mine, Jackie Leavin, who I'd been friendly with, I'd worked with. He'd taken ill and he died suddenly just as I was starting to write the book, and almost as a way of keeping his memory fresh or keeping him alive, I thought I'll use one of his songs as the title of the book. And my publisher in the UK wasn't happy about it. They said it's way too long as a title. They said, we can barely squeeze your name onto the front, it won't fit on the spine, reviewers are going to get fed up typing it in, they'd like a nice short title please. And I fought my corner. I said, look, when you read the book, you will see this is the only possible title. And then when it went to #1, they said, great, we'll have a nice big long title next time, please. And Jackie had a song that had a line in it, Saints of the Shadow Bible. And I'd always wondered what that meant, the Saints of the Shadow Bible following me from bar to bar into eternity. I'd never got the chance to ask him what it meant. So I just started riffing on what I could make that title mean. So I came up with who were the saints and what was the Shadow Bible. Even Dogs in the Wild, I got the idea, I got the plot, I got the theme, and then I was listening to this band, The Associates, and please, if you haven't read the book, don't look at the lyrics of the song before you read it, because it does give away the plot. But that song, thematically, was what I was trying to write about in that book. And the same goes to a certain extent for Rather Be the Devil. Rather Be the Devil is actually I'd Rather Be the Devil, an old blues number by Skip James, but recorded by John Martin on his album Solidaire. I was a huge fan of his music, Anglo-Scottish singer-songwriter, no longer with us. There's a theme emerging here. But I didn't want I didn't want it to be in the first person, that was too specific, so I got rid of that and just called it Rather Be the Devil. And that was my downfall, because Saints of the Shadow Bible, 5 words went to #1 in the UK. Even Dogs in the Wild, 5 words went to #1 in the UK. Standing in a Man's Grave, 5 words went to #1 in the UK. I'd Rather Be the Devil would have been 5 words. I took it down to 4, stalled at #2.
That's way more sympathy than he deserves. Come on, really? Who was #1? Do you have a guess? Anybody?
Well, no, 2 people were #1. I didn't tell you this, but the first week I was done in by Jeffrey Archer.
Oh.
And then the next week he went to 3, I stayed at 2, but Lee Chow's new book came in. So there you go.
You'll have to sort him
I
out.
was stuck at 2, yeah.
So, do you have the title in mind when you started? I can't write a book without a title.
I need a title, but it might not end up being the finished title. For years, the title I loved, and it was called Dark Entries. And it was actually a song by a goth band called Bauhaus. And I kept calling my books that, and my publisher kept turning them down, saying it's too dark. And I kept trying and they kept saying no. And then eventually I got asked by DC Comics if I would do a comic book. And it was going to be set in hell. So I called it Dark Entries, and they went, perfect. So nothing is ever lost to the writer, You tuck it away, you might get some use of it. You might get some use of it later on. I mean, I once wrote, a friend of mine and I we were going to do a film, Ocean's 11. We're big fans of kind of heist movies, watching an Ocean's 11 set in Edinburgh. And we came up with this film, we started scripting it, and it was going to be called Doors Open. And my friend, who was a screenwriter, pitched it to a few producers, and they went, nah, no thanks, pal. And so it went in the bottom drawer. And then the New York Times got in touch with me and they said, could you do a serial for our Sunday magazine? And I said, well, do you fancy a heist? And they went, oh, great. So I wrote up this kind of 15, 16-part heist story called Doors Open, having dusted off that idea. And then my British publisher saw it and they said, well, that's great. Could you beef it up and make it a full-length book? And I went, yeah, sure. I'd love to do that. So I did that. Published, and it was on sale at Heathrow Airport, and Stephen Fry, the actor, was running for a plane, grabbed it from the bookstore to read on the plane, read it and went, this would make a really good film. So it was filmed for television with Stephen Fry in what was supposed to be Sean Connery's role, and but my friend wrote the script. So it actually started off with him going to be doing this, and it came all the way back around. It's just a lovely thing to happen. But it was going to be all the cream of, it was going to be the cream of Scottish acting talent. Sean Connery was going to be the mastermind. Ewan McGregor was going to be his #2. James McAvoy was going to be the hoaxer, the art forger. We had it all mapped out, and ended up with Stephen Fry. But we were quite happy with it.
Did Then you didn't do a Scottish
He
accent.
did not do a Scottish accent.
Because I'm trying to picture that and I just can't do it.
Oh, he can do accents though. I mean, he could probably have a go. I mean, he does a lot of accents in the Harry Potter audiobooks. I'm a huge fan of his narration of the Harry Potters. I think over here you get Jim Dale, possibly in the audio, but in the UK when it first came out, it was Stephen Fry. I was hugely impressed.
So
I can't do voices. People say,
No.
well, why don't you do your own audiobooks? I can't do a range of voices.
Yeah, I was asked the same thing, but I write about a Texan in Paris. So I don't
Me not.
exactly, that's a non-starter from like number one.
Yeah, you don't just write that though. You've got books set in Austin as well, right?
Just one, yeah, it's a standalone set in Austin, yeah. But it's an Englishman. I guess I could do that. I could pull that off.
When's the great Scottsdale novel coming? You could do a Scottsdale novel.
He's actually got one in Barcelona, which you're
Yeah.
The Reluctant Matador,
Yeah, yeah.
which is really quite interesting.
The Reluctant Matador's a good idea.
Yeah, it is.
That was one where I came up with the title. I'm like, I gotta write the book to match that.
And probably not in Paris. So
Exactly.
please consider. Can I ask Ian a question? I was thinking, I think we have one copy left of, is it Rebus's Scotland? You've done, what have you done about the series that's not a novel, but rather reflects, the books and the characters and so forth?
Well, no, I mean, I did Rebus's Scotland because the people that used to do the jackets of the UK editions, they were actually two Edinburgh-based photographers. And they would say, okay, give us some locations in the book, and I would tell them to go away, take a moody photograph, and so it would actually mean something. It would be relevant to the story. And they said, we've got all these photographs we've not used. We're thinking of doing a photographic book. And I said, well, why don't I write some essays to go with it? That's almost like frequently asked questions. So you'll find out about how I came up with Rebus, my take on Scotland, what I think the crime novel can do and can't do in terms of looking at society or looking at politics. All of that would be these essays. And the hardcover, which is really, really hard to find, had a lot more photographs in it. And then when they brought it down to a paperback size, they cut half the photographs out. But it's a lovely, lovely book. They've stopped doing the jackets now. I don't know why, but they stopped doing the jackets. It's more kind of stock footage than it used to be. But I used to like it because I could sort of hold the book up and go, anybody recognise this place? And I could say, look, that is Flesh Market Close. Or in the States, Flesh Market Alley. You don't get to use the real street.
Well, the reason I asked is I was wondering if you were going to do something now that this is the 40th anniversary, we're going to move presumably to the 40th anniversary. I'm taking a long view despite your attempts to shorten everything up. Might you do something of a similar nature?
I don't know. I mean, I'm doing I'm doing radio things and TV slots and stuff, and that's probably enough. I mean, I'm writing the occasional essay, and I'm writing new introductions to some of the books. New introductions to some of the books. I'm doing a special introduction to Black and Blue. There's a little box set coming out of Noughts and Crosses, the first one, Black and Blue, the breakthrough, and Exit Music, which was meant to be the last one. And I've got all these beautiful line drawings of Edinburgh on the front of them. And it's a nice little slipcase edition just for the anniversary. So I've done an introduction for that, but a long form now. And this is my year off. Come on, Barbara, this is my year off. I'm supposed to have a sabbatical year. I'm possibly doing a stage play. A Rebus stage play is kind of being bounced around as a potential thing. That I would be doing with someone else, a professional dramatist, would be doing most of the hard work, is my thinking.
You just stand there and criticise. No, he wouldn't do that.
I mean, I would sort of storyboard the idea and then I would go away and write it and make it actually workable.
That sounds fantastic.
That would be fun. Well, I did watch a stage play a few years ago called Dark Road, and it was kind of hard work, but it was fun as well. So I don't know. Let's wait and see. I wouldn't make it as complex as that. That was far too complicated a staging. Yeah, there you go. You've got the. What are you giving that? That's the little brochure about it. Dark Road at the Lyceum Theatre in Edinburgh, and they were thrilled at the Lyceum because they had the best bar receipts they've ever had for any play in their whole run of their.
Before or during?
Yeah, and after. I mean, really, they really went for it. So I might be doing that, and I'm doing a 5-part radio drama short story thing for the BBC. And I'm doing some short stories as well, Christmas short stories for magazines and things. So I mean, I'm ticking along, but no novel. And I just and I've not got any ideas. So feel free to write to me, Ian Rankin, Oxford Bar, Scotland. That'll get to me. Yeah, I know.
I'm going to take a picture. Does anybody? I mean, we've got like 700 people here. Somebody has a question. Oh, don't be shy. Come along. Oh, lady at the front.
So I don't want to do spoilers, but I don't know what's here.
I'm the one with the spare microphone.
Sorry.
Here, you take that.
I'll have all three. No.
Yeah, right. Stereo.
In the books, it seems like in every book I've read particularly lately, every character has an advancement, a change. Do you go into the book saying, I want Siobhan to mature to this, and I want Fox to deteriorate to that, and I want, you know, and clearly you had the idea with Rebus and his health.
Yeah, again, it's kind of piecemeal to a certain extent. I mean, with this book, for example, there's been a lot of structural changes in the police in Scotland recently. And one of those has meant the opening up of this new facility called the Scottish Crime Campus, a place called Garcosh in Lanarkshire. And I was able to get a visit there. And I saw all these kind of, it's where all the senior cops are hanging out, and senior fraud investigators from the Internal Revenue, and the Internal Affairs cops, and the prosecutors are all in this one big building. And I thought, this is, you know, the sort of place that Fox would end up. He's a pen pusher, he's a yes man, he's a suit, you know, he's going to get advancement. So I thought maybe in the next book I do that. Oh, if I do that, that changes his relationship with Siobhan Clarke. You know, she will be jealous, frustrated, she thinks she should have been the one getting the promotion, not him. She's a better cop than him, a better detective than him, and yet somehow he's the one getting the advancement, not her. So their relationship changes. They can then both talk about that to Rebus. There's a kind of intercessionary, you know, interceding in it for them. And at the same time, Rebus's health is a bit dodgy. He can't tell Siobhan Clarke that because she would care too much. But he can tell Fox, because he actually says to Fox, you don't like me enough to care. So their relationships do change, but it's just the way it would be. It's like that's how it would be.
And there's a super nice moment too in the pub with Rebus and Fox, where they're both kind of commiserating over sharing a non-alcoholic drink together, and that's kind of like you really see them connect there, and that was I really enjoyed that. I mean, you talk about changing characters, and that was a real moment where I felt like, wow, these two people are very, very different, connecting.
Well, I think in a previous book, you know, Fox says something like he's an alcoholic who gave up drink, and Rebus is an alcoholic who didn't. You know, and in this book he has to. I mean, his health is deteriorating, and so he's told he's got to cut back on the cigarettes and the booze. And I've got a character who stands outside the Oxford bar, tapping on the window, holding up a pack of cigarettes, like taunting him, saying, "Come outside and have a cigarette." And there's a lot of jokes at Rebus's expense that he can't. You know, he should be. You know, he's trying to get not smoking, trying not to smoke, trying not to drink, cutting down on the drink. People are going, "I don't believe it." Another thing I did was, you know, because when you do this, because it is organic, it means, but you add stuff in. So now he's got COPD, he can't unhave it. So from every book from now on, I have to remember he's got that. I was 100 pages into this book, so I was sitting up in Cromarty, writing away, it was all going really well, 100 pages into the first draft, and I went, oh shit, he's got a dog. And I'd forgotten that in the previous book he got a dog. So I had to go back and put Brillo the dog in. I thought, okay, so he can't go away long distances, he's got to get something to feed the dog, he's got to go back and take the dog for a walk. And it's all this stuff that I keep adding to his life that I've then got to remember is there.
Because you know you can't kill the dog, right?
You can't kill the dog, you can't kill the pets. No, you can kill human beings.
Right, maybe.
You can kill, yeah, don't get now. Some of the nastiest fan mail I ever got was when Rebus accidentally killed a cat in one of the early books. He locked his girlfriend's cat out of the cat flat because it was annoying him, and then a fox got it. So I mean, it was an accident, but then she blamed him, and that was the end of their relationship. Oh my God, the hate mail I got. So I knew from then, the top tip, any mystery writers nowadays, kill as many human beings as you like, in as gruesome a fashion as you like, but don't have a cat accidentally die.
Push out, either way.
You had mentioned that there was an earlier on British horror writer. What was the name of the gentleman?
Oh, the horror writers I was reading at that time, people like Clive Barker, Books of Blood. You know, they had two phenomenal books of short stories called Books of Blood, Volumes 1 and 2, and they were amazing. But there were a bunch of them around at that time. I mean, Alan Moore was just starting to do really quite horror-like things in the comic books. He would eventually write Watchmen, but before that, Swamp Thing. He took over the run of Swamp Thing and he made it an extraordinary comic book. And Neil Gaiman was just starting to write comic books at that time as well. And there was a whole bunch of them. Ramsey Campbell had been in the late 70s, early 80s. He was a Liverpool-based horror writer who was a big influence on Clive Barker. So I got into his stuff as well. And before that, there was, what's his name, The Rats.
Herbert?
James Herbert.
Yeah.
James Herbert. I mean, he was, you know, when I was a teenager, it was James Herbert.
Fog.
Yeah, the fog, the rats,
Yeah.
and this, and that. Yeah, a real creeping sense of dread and doom in all his books.
Yeah.
I loved all that stuff. I mean, I did toy with it, but I just, again, my heart wasn't in it. I was scrabbling around looking for what kind of writer I wanted to be, and I just didn't know. It took me a long time, and I was so pleased when crime fiction found me. I didn't go looking for it, but it found me. And straight away, I got a letter from the Crime Writers Association saying, "You've written a crime novel, join us." And I thought, oh, it's nice if you're welcome. And all the crime writers at that time, there was a whole bunch of us who were kind of young Turks, much the same age, all helping each other out. I mean, Philip Kerr was around at that time, Michael Dibdin was around, Val McDermott was just starting, there was me, there was a whole bunch of us at that time who felt we were trying to move things on a little bit from P.D. James and Ruth Rendell. From the cozier end of I mean, Ruth Rendell's not that cozy, but we were sort of changing. I think our books were getting a little bit more political than the previous generation's books had been, or overtly political.
Moving out of the villages.
Definitely moving the crime novel out of the villages into more urban situations and talking about social issues. Yeah. Yeah.
And did winning the Gold Dagger for Black and Blue really make a giant difference to you in terms of your visibility and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, until Black and Blue came along, the early books were not selling well. I was what's called mid-list. I was making a buck, but not really a huge amount of money, just about enough to get by on. But publishers, after a while, they go, well, we've tried marketing, we've tried this, we've tried that, it ain't working. And they start to lose a little bit of interest or faith that you're going to take it to the next level. But while I was writing Black and Blue, I just felt, wow, this is a much bigger book, it's a deeper book, it's a stronger book. Rebus has got real three-dimensional characteristics. I really know the inside of his head now. The previous books were all leading up to this one. And it was published in beginning of January, I forget which year, but published beginning of January, and in the Times newspaper, the London Times, the reviewer, Marcel Berlins, who does all their crime reviews, said, "I won't read a better crime novel all year." And that was in January. And come November, it won the Gold Dagger, which was a kind of validation. And my publisher went, okay, Ian knows what he's doing. They started putting money into marketing, taking out adverts in newspapers and magazines and stuff. And in paperback, it sold 4 times as many copies as my previous books.
Well, no, that's true. I mean, I've been with Ian all along, except for the
Through thick and thin.
the first book. But I remember, the absolute bump, the publisher interest on the whole bit. It's easy now to look at him, winner of the Diamond Dagger, winner of Edgar Awards, Othello, and all that other stuff, and think, it's always been that way. But honestly, it wasn't. It really was Black and Blue that just made a dramatic difference.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, that was my that was the 7th or 8th Rebus book, and it was about my 15th published novel.
Right.
And even at that, it didn't break the top 10. It didn't get into the UK top 10. The book after it, Hanging Garden, I think got 1 week at number 10. And then the book after that, I think got to number 1. Or maybe the book after that. So it was like 8, 9, 10, 11 Rebus books in before I hit number 1 in the UK. Didn't hit the New York Times list until I brought Rebus back in Standing in the Man's Grave. So don't give up. Don't give up.
There's hope for me yet.
Really? Rebus novel 18 was the first time I broke into the New York Times bestseller list. It was a long time coming.
Let me just say one other thing, because it came up last night and I was going to repeat it. We're very fortunate that we get lots of authors who are like Ian that sell very well, and we can then afford to do events for authors that are just starting out or that you've never heard of. And if you really went back over 27 years and thought about the number of authors who've signed their first, and in many cases, every book here, Lee Child, Michael Connelly, Don Winslow, it's just a tremendous number of writers. And here's my point. If you come and see them, you will always have that moment with them. I mean, there was like nobody here with Lee. Don Winslow had 1 person. Michael might have had 20. There's a lady over there who reminded me. She's been here for some of those. You'll never forget that. And so, on nights when you think, I don't want to go down and meet this new writer. Those are the ones that really matter, that it's great if you show up for them.
And those of us in that situation totally appreciate it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really important. All right.
We've all been there. We've all
There
been
was
there.
a
We've all
question
been
over
there.
there, so let me.
I have a teacher voice, so I can just
Yeah,
share.
go on.
So when you write a character and then it gets turned into TV series that I've also seen, how much input do you have on what happens on the screen, or is there any change, or what?
How much input do I get into the TV? None. But that was partly my own choice. When it was originally taken for television, I talked to a few crime writers whose stuff had been televised, and they said, get involved, don't get involved. It'll probably change the way you write about your characters. And I thought, I don't want that to happen. So I never saw a script, I never tried to write a script, and I never watched it. I've never watched an episode. And so I was quite blithe. And then people would say, I don't understand, they keep changing the plots and that, and I went, you know. They changed the actor, of course, went from being John Hannah to being Ken Stott. But at the same time, they took it from 2 hours to 1 hour per book. Now that I didn't like, because that was a 45-page script, because it's 45 minutes and 15 minutes of ads. So I didn't like that they were chucking away everything except the title, and then building it up again from the ground. And in 45 minutes, the city of Edinburgh can't breathe, the themes can't emerge, the characters can't develop, all the stuff that I try and do in the books you lose, all you get is this kind of mystery, this twist. So I got the rights back, and I'm waiting, I'm hoping we're going to do it in Danish or Swedish. Because those guys seem to get 10 hours or 20 hours, right?
It just feels like it.
So I'm hoping to get some of that length, you know, 3 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, something like that would be ideal per book. So I'm just waiting for a producer, for a company to say, yeah, okay, we'll do it. And there's always conversations about it, but it hasn't happened yet. But I think this time I would get more involved.
Wouldn't it be good too that Scotland seems to have subsidies, or at least make filming welcome?
Not as much as other places.
Really?
I mean, we lost out in Game of Thrones to Northern Ireland because Northern Ireland came up with more money for the production. We've got Outlander, of course.
Right, but that's over near Glasgow, right? They'll be
That's
new
up, no, it's up near
Outlander
Inverness.
too.
It's up near Inverness. Mostly
They
in
left
Inverness.
this year, they went somewhere else now.
South Africa.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, there's not as much. There's a bit of filming goes on in Edinburgh, but there isn't. What we need is a studio. We've not
Right.
got it. I mean, they've been talking about building a film studio in Scotland for 30, 40 years, and it's
Oh,
never
but
happened.
maybe you'll inspire them, because after all, Edinburgh, you really want it to be an integral part. And,
Yeah, I would love to see Edinburgh on the big screen. It's not just the TV screen, but the big screen. I know Trainspotting 2's out just now. But, you know, Edinburgh's such a powerful place, and it's such a visual place. That, I mean, you can't get a bad shot of Edinburgh. And I would love to see more of it on the big screen.
Paris of the North.
No, it's the Athens of the North, Barbara. It's the Athens of the North.
Oh, sorry.
Nearly bankrupt.
I was trying to give Mark a
and,
little push. Another question. I can run around. Way back there.
I don't know, do I need it?
Yep. Around the corner.
Okay. Oh, now you can't hear me anyway. Yes, okay. All right, so you've got Rebus getting older, he's lost his support group, he doesn't have those people. Have you considered throwing Rebus into a dark web situation or an internet situation where the poor guy has to open up a computer? You know, have you thought about that?
That couldn't happen. No, I mean, he barely, I mean, I had one character trying to explain Twitter to him a couple of weeks ago. That was tough enough. He's going, you do what? What does that mean, 140 characters? I don't get it. He just doesn't understand computers. I mean, every time he needs computer help, he has to go and ask someone in the police, in the CID for help. No, the dark web, forget. I mean, the dark web to Rebus is what's hanging up in his bedroom, in the corners where he doesn't dust. You know. No, I mean, I could have some fun with him doing that, but he wouldn't get very far with the dark web. And it's a bit technological for me. I'm a bit of a Luddite. You know, I've just explained my laptop hasn't even got the internet in it. I can barely use a mobile phone. I cannot use sat-nav. You know, I've got sat-nav in my car. I've had the car for what, about 15 years? I have no idea how to use it. Literally no idea how to use it. I mean, my car sold. It's got one of those telephones that's actually still connected to a lead. Yeah, so it's a car phone. It's a car phone. It's like something out of Kojak. Almost. I mean, anything but. It's hilarious. No, I can't imagine Rebus in the dark web. I can imagine Siobhan Clarke, maybe. You know, I mean, I keep waiting for a story that's a Siobhan Clarke story. I would love to give her a story, but I get the theme first, then the story, and then I say which character's the one to front this. And so far, I've not found one that felt like her story. But it doesn't mean to say it won't happen. It just hasn't happened yet.
Is there anybody over here while I'm out here? Question?
There's a lady in the second. I'm going to give this lady my mic.
Actually, that was my question.
That was your question. That was a question.
I was
What,
going
the
to
dark
ask.
web?
No, about Siobhan.
about
Were
Siobhan
we
getting a
ever
book?
going to see a book with her?
Hope springs eternal. Yes.
You spent an awful lot of time. Thanks, sir. You spent an awful lot of time with Rebus. How do you two get along as people?
Thank you, Caroline Todd. You looking for tips? Come to the wrong place. How do we get along? I don't think we would get along. I mean, I enjoy hanging out with him, but he's not the most pleasant guy to hang out with. Inside of his head is not the nicest place always to be. I think I'm more sanguine than him. I'm not as much of a loner as him. I don't have the problems with booze. I don't smoke. The problems that he's got. He's a different generation from me. He sees the world in a very different way. He sees the world very much, he's like an Old Testament prophet. He sees it in good and evil, black and white, no middle ground. And he'd see me as being a wishy-washy liberal. So if, God forbid, he walked into the Oxford bar and I was standing there, we could talk about music for a while, and we could talk about our roots, because we both grew up in the same village. And we could talk a little bit about police work, I guess. But in the end, he would walk away. You know, he wouldn't see me as being somebody who's got an awful lot in common with. So often in the books, I'm using the other characters, Siobhan Clarke, Malcolm Fox, and others, to have a debate with Rebus, to debate with him and try and change his mind about some aspects of the way the world is. And you know, I mean, he believes in kind of retribution, and he believes in people can't always change. You know, once a villain, always a villain and stuff. And sometimes I try and change his mind about that a little bit and have a conversation with him. But he's also he's been a very useful way for me looking at the world. You know, I can hide behind him, and he can say things I could never say in public, but he can say them. And it's been great to hide behind them during the whole political situation recently. You know, people say to me, "Oh, Ian, how will you vote?" And I'll go, "Well, Rebus would vote no to independence, and Siobhan Clarke would vote yes. That's it. That's my view." You know, so I can hide behind all my characters, which is really useful, so you don't fall out with anybody. They do. And people say to me, they say, "Oh, why does Rebus hate Glasgow?" He doesn't. Right, they say, "Why do you hate Glasgow?" I say, "I don't hate Glasgow, Rebus hates Glasgow." You know, "Why do you hate uniformed cops?" I don't. Rebus hates them. Or, you know, he looks down on them. All that kind of stuff. So, yeah, mixed feelings about him. But on the other hand, I'm glad he's still around. I'm glad he's still around. And he's got me a few free drinks in the Oxford bar down the years.
Alright guys, we have time for one more question. And it better be a good one, I don't want to... No.
No pressure.
Come on.
No pressure.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if this was intentional, but I think you've done a really good job in this book showing how Siobhan as a woman gets treated differently. In many ways, when she interviews people, she's tougher. She seems tougher than I think she's been before, and yet she still gets insulted, and there are sort of misogynist overtones, and then there's the bathroom scene, and I don't know if that was intentional, but I thought you did a very good job of distinguishing what she goes through.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, the police is still a male-dominated job, profession in Scotland, especially in the upper echelons. Yeah, there's a glass ceiling that officers like Siobhan Clarke need to break through, and it's happening slowly, but it's happening. I didn't feel confident when I started writing the series, writing it from a woman's point of view, and there weren't many strong women characters in the early books. And then women police officers and other crime writers would say, "Oh, I like Siobhan, I think you do a good job with her," and so I got a bit more confident about writing from her, well, just, you know, showing her as a real person. I think she's a bit of a loner. I mean, I would like to cheer her up a bit if I could. She's learned too much from Rebus, I think. She's too much like Rebus in some ways. She's too much about the job. She needs to get out and enjoy herself. And of course, when she goes to the club in this book, it kind of backfires.
But part of the reason for that is because, as you're saying, she has to work twice as hard to prove herself. So she didn't get to. I mean, one time she lets her hair down, right? And then somebody takes a picture and denigrates her. Yeah. So that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it is a good point. And I mean, you know, one of these days she's going to have to get her own story. You know, I need to find the story. I just need to find that story.
So everybody can write to Ian Kerr at the Oxford Bar with their really good idea. Now, I think it's only fair if we end up by asking Mark whose books I love and who publishes normally in August. What are you working on, and what can we expect to see from you?
Oh, well, I just finished a new book in my series, which is my main character. His name is Hugo Marston. He's the head of security at the U.S. Embassy in Paris. I do that because a lot of my friends set books in East Texas and Ohio, and I would prefer to do my research in Paris. But I actually just finished a historical novel set in Amsterdam. Because my 12-year-old daughter is obsessed with Anne Frank, I've actually written a book where a 12-year-old girl and the guy who rescues her work together to rescue the Frank family. So it's very revisionist. But when I told my agent about it, she said, "Holy F, I love it." So I thought, well, I'll go ahead and write it. So I've just literally this weekend finished that. So
we'll see you back in summer.
Yeah, well, the new Hugo book comes out. The Sorbonne Affair comes out in August, so I'll come back and see you.
Wonderful.
This August.
Isn't it lucky that Austin's such a short flight away?
Yeah, except see, my book comes out in August, and like I'm here in August, and that's not the best time. It's not.
I actually have an idea.
I don't remember seeing most of these people last August.
I'm actually thinking about doing a Poison Pen conference, which we haven't done for a long time, on the second Saturday in September. So that might turn out to be a really, it'll still be hot, but it won't be August, right? So there we are. So we've now come to the point in the program where we like to give away a book to encourage you to read authors that might not be familiar to you. The number will be in the book if you purchase one of Ian's or Mark's books tonight. This is the #1 independent bookstore pick for February. By a Canadian author named Elon Mastai. And since time and is marching out has been a theme this evening, this is actually a kind of interesting book about what would we give up for love, how far would we leap to save the ones we most care about, and where would we leap if it in fact took us to a different place. I think the last sentence of this book, and no cheating, is really remarkable, and it's our Modern First Club pick for February, and it's on its way to us. But anyway, this is the advanced reading copy. So, great. Ian, would you pick a number between 1 and 47? You have to be here to win, so if the first number called is not here, we move on.
17.
Right here.
Right there. Okay. Wonderful. Then you get a copy. It's called All Are Wrong Today. So I hope you guys will give our two authors a big round of applause for coming in.